think it's important to acknowledge that the promoters of liberal Zionism, economists like Peter here, academics, leaders of organizations with the liberal Zionist ethos, genuinely want change. They intend their beliefs and proposals to be the Zionist politics of the Jewish diaspora that has political agency and can influence political outcomes in Israel. But I contend that liberal Zionism has failed and will continue to fail to have any significant influence on Israeli government policies for two fundamental reasons. First, because of its internal contradictions, and second, because its prescriptions simply don't address the key problems and political realities in Israel-Palestine. Therefore, as an idea with political agency, liberal Zionism has no future. But having no future doesn't mean that its present impact is neutral. On the contrary, by acting as a fig leaf for the only Zionism that does have political agency today, that is right-wing, messianic, ethno-nationalist, secular Zionism, liberal Zionism is positively harmful. It acts as a barrier to achieving a truly liberal and just resolution of the Palestine-Israel conflict. Now, that's not to say that I think that liberal Zionism is dead. I think it was Kennedy, JFK, who said ideas have endurance without death. So I argue that it will continue to exist, but as a means for a shrinking number of diaspora Jews to relate to a nostalgic view of Israel. In other words, it will be a means of Jewish self-expression, a choice that gives cultural content to diasporic Jewish life for some, but has nothing to do with influencing Israel's political or ideological direction. But where does liberal Zionism come from? Well, it was never a stream of Zionist ideology. In fact, in my view, it's a phenomenon that really only emerged as such in the late 1990s, when the Oslo Accords came increasingly under attack from right-wing forces inside and outside Israel, adding to pressures that led to the unraveling of the agreements. Jews who clung to Oslo as the expression of their liberal principles, two states, two peoples, land for peace, clustered around the liberal Zionist position, the last chance to defend their humanist, romantic, Zionist ideal. Now, there was also something anachronistic about this, I think. Zachary wrote, Zionist ideology today subsists largely only as a historical relic. And I agree with that. After the establishment of the state, determining the nature of Jewish nationalism became the prerogative of those who held political power. And let's be clear, there was never anything particularly liberal about Zionism. It's true that there were elements of liberalism in the Zionism of both Herzl and Jabotinsky, but it wasn't their liberalism that appealed to the Jewish masses. It was the passion of their Zionism. And the political giant who shaped the Yishuv and the new state in its first few decades, David Ben-Gurion, was a dirigist, socialist, and an illiberal nationalist. He was not a liberal Zionist, as I've heard some liberal Zionists argue. So, anachronistic, full of internal contradictions, and failing to address illiberal political realities, it's not surprising that everything that liberal Zionists stand for is in doubt, and some of their leading commentators know it and have written about it. Now, central to how liberal Zionists see Israel's future is the two-state solution. They recognize that Palestinians have a right to self-determination and an independent Palestinian state. It's restorative justice for dispossession, and they know the occupation must end before it can happen. But it's a deeply flawed program. The two states for two peoples recipe is based on notions of national homogeneity and demographic separation. While the truth is that, despite extreme separation measures, unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, the security partition, fence and wall, the proposed absorption into Israel of huge settlement blocks in any peace deal, Palestinians and Israelis are living together in a reality of spatial and binational homogeneity. There's no symmetry or justice in this reality, however. Almost all the power resides on one side. The liberal Zionist idea that these entities can negotiate as equals over state-oriented partition is a fiction. Now, we've known for a long time that as a deliverable political option, the two-state solution is practically dead. More to the point, and I think liberal Zionists have a hard time acknowledging this, all theoretical talk of an ideal two states, or even of a one-state arrangement, freely chosen, is moot. Because a de facto single, unequal, and undemocratic state exists, one sovereign entity under Israeli political, military, and economic dominion between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. In it, rights for Jews are guaranteed, rights for Palestinians are curtailed or virtually non-existent. Now, liberal Zionists, I think, largely accept the Jews dispossessed Palestinians to make way for a Jewish state, but believe that it was an acceptable price others had to pay to meet overriding Jewish needs. But this means that securing Palestinian rights to national self-determination will always be subordinated to liberal Zionist insistence on prioritizing Jewish ethno-religious preferences over full equality. So, no acceptance of UN Resolution 194, no full acceptance of responsibility for the Nakba, and no allowing Palestinians to commemorate the Nakba in the State of Israel. Palestinians are told to forget their history, Jews are told to remember theirs. Liberal Zionists are convinced that Israel can be both Jewish and democratic, but they fail to explain how the derivation of authority from God in Judaism can be reconciled with the sovereign power of the people in a democracy. The state, supposedly guided by halakha, can have the trappings of a democracy, but still have laws and practices that discriminate against non-Jewish minorities. The power of inflexible, racist, and narrow-minded Orthodox religious authorities to determine what's Jewish about the Jewish state, supported by right-wing legislators, makes a nonsense of a Jewish and democratic symbiosis, and makes Israel an ethnocracy. Such a conclusion is reinforced by liberal Zionist insistence that Israel must have a Jewish majority in perpetuity. Yet to achieve this inevitably implies policies of exclusion and discrimination. A belief that Israel will be a morally defensible, democratic, and Jewish majority state if it returns to the pre-67 borders is a false idealization of pre-67 Israel. Discrimination against the Palestinian minority, 20% in Israel, is endemic. Liberal Zionists may support Palestinian rights in a separate state, but as far as I know, they don't accept acknowledging Palestinian national rights in Israel. The impression liberal Zionists give that their program promises Palestinians what they want is, in my view, false. In my reading of Palestinian views and my discussions with Palestinians, it's clear that they do not see it, as liberal Zionism, as a viable path to peace and reconciliation. Liberal Zionists may want something ostensibly liberal in the future, some Palestinians believe, but the liberal Zionists never set a deadline, Palestinians argue. So all the while, they accommodate themselves to the ongoing colonialist policies of the state. Effectively, liberal Zionists are saying that there is no Palestinian minimum or Zionist maximum that they would not accept. So liberal Zionism, in my view, is becoming increasingly isolated. It's challenged ever more strongly from the diaspora Jewish left, and it can't distinguish itself sufficiently clearly from the Zionist extreme right. It may speak more softly about its commitment to Jewish ethno-religious preferences, but that commitment places it less distant from Jewish supremacism than it likes to think it is. So it ends up functioning as a fig leaf for the very form of Zionist colonial expansionism it seeks to oppose. But only this Zionism has political agency, and the degree to which liberal Zionists continue to want to populate the Zionist space prevents more widespread realization that supremacist Zionism is all Zionism is really about today. So in short, liberalism is inclusivist, Zionism is exclusivist. Liberalism is about equal rights, human rights regardless of ethnicity or creed. Zionism is about securing Jewish rights at the expense of the non-Jewish native inhabitants of the land between the Jordan and the Mediterranean.